Hey everyone, in this video I'll be talking about the best classes for new players in Baldur's Gate 3, breaking down all the different abilities, skills, proficiencies, weapons, armor, and more for each of these classes. I just want to start the video off by saying that every single class is viable, so play what you want to play. You can easily beat the game with any of these choices, but I'll break down the roles and everything that comes with each of these classes. Now, the melee characters in Baldur's Gate 3 are your barbarians, fighters, rogues, monks, paladins, rangers, and bards. There's also subclasses for the wizard and choices for the warlock to also specialize in melee. We got spellcasters with the bard, cleric, druid, wizard, warlock, and sorcerer, and charisma-based classes, which are your sorcerers, warlocks, paladins, and bards. Now, if you're looking for some of the easier options in the game, charisma classes kind of are the way to do it. They also get important skill proficiencies, persuasion being great if you want it to be a good aligned character, deception if you kind of want to play the middle ground, a little more evil, and intimidation for kind of the full-on evil. These are important because the bard can choose any skill proficiencies that they want. The paladin has access to the persuasion skill, the sorcerer gets persuasion and deception, and the warlock gets deception and intimidation. I have it from my my race or origin choice, but you can also get skill proficiencies from like your background and your race. But those are ones that you want to have if you want to have an easier time, and these are the 4 classes that specialize in charisma and get those skills. Now, I'm not going to say that these 4 classes are the best in Baldur's Gate 3, but they're going to have a bit of an easier time in a lot of situations. And if you wanted more of like a melee role, bard and paladin are go-tos. If you want to be a spellcaster with an easier time, the sorcerer is one of the best classes in the game. And the warlock kind of floats between the two because they get a bit of spellcasting and they also can melee attack. The bard also does that as well. And I'm not going to talk too much about multiclassing, but all 4 of these actually multiclass very well together because they share their casting skill as charisma. The first topic I'll talk about is armor proficiencies. There's only 2 classes that naturally will get heavy armor proficiency, and that's the paladin and the fighter. Something to note, if you multiclass and add them in, they'll only give you medium armor proficiency at best. However, the cleric and the ranger come in here because they add subclass abilities to give you heavy armor proficiency. So if you multiclass them in, let's say, the Tempest Domain cleric, it gives you heavy armor proficiency. Same thing with the ranger, because at level 1, they can take the ranger knight here, which gives them the heavy armor proficiency as well. And these will add it again if you multiclass in. As for medium armor proficiencies, that's the barbarian, fighter, cleric, druid, ranger, and paladin. One nice thing is not a lot of people realize the druid has medium armor proficiency, so early game they're actually quite strong. And the sword bard subclass and valor bard will give you medium armor proficiency, and with the warlock, the hexblade will also give you the medium armor proficiency. And for light armor proficiency, that's only the warlock and the rogue, which means that if you're a sorcerer, monk, or wizard, you only have clothing proficiency. But some of the most common races will give you your light armor proficiency, so you probably have it if you're playing a shield dwarf, Githyanki, half-elf, or a human, and I typically run a half-elf for that reason. With half-elf and human also giving shield proficiency, which is really important because that will keep a lot of people alive because you can use a quarterstaff with your shields. And for the shield proficiencies, that's barbarians, clerics, druids, rangers, paladins, and fighters. However, the valor bard and the hexblade warlock can also get shield proficiency. Now onto the fun stuff, weapons and stabbing. Barbarians, fighters, paladins, and rangers don't have to worry. They get all martial weapon proficiencies, so they can use whatever they'd like. It might surprise you, but the ranger or the rogue and the bard have the next most proficiencies. They get short sword and long sword proficiencies, which is great because in Act 1, there's long swords that are considered finesse weapons, meaning you can use dexterity for them. The rogue and the bard being dexterity-based classes. They also get hand crossbow proficiency, which is great because you can do offhand crossbow attacks just to boost your overall DPS. And they also get rapier proficiencies, which actually have some really good weapons in that mix, so they're quite powerful. Now, the cleric gets flail and morningstar proficiency, and honestly, those weapons typically tend to be a bit more defensive in their nature. The druid is an interesting one. They also get shillelagh as a cantrip, which lets them use their spellcasting ability for melee attack rolls. And this is really strong because it infuses their club or staff. And oddly enough, a torch can count. So you can get that 4 to 11 bludgeoning damage on a torch. And the torch will give you an additional 1d4 of fire damage, making the druid one of the best melee classes at the very start of the game. And druid proficiencies are weird. They don't get simple weapons, but they get clubs, daggers, javelins, maces, quarterstaffs, scimitars, sickles, and spears. But typically you're going to want to use like clubs, staffs, and torches. The monk gets simple weapons and short sword proficiency, which the dexterous attack allows them to use their dex modifier in place of strength if it's higher. The wizards and the sorcerers only get their staffs, clubs, and light crossbows. Now, one thing I want to mention for the spellcasters, sometimes there's some really good short bows or long bows that you can just throw on them. Don't let them use it for an attack, but take the passives like a boost to initiative or some resistances. And the Warlock is an interesting beast in its own right in many ways, but it only gets a simple weapon proficiency, but that's not to worry because they can use their bind Pact of the Blade once they hit level 3 and get proficiency in any melee weapon, and then use their charisma for attack rolls. So honestly, pretty good caster and spell and melee attacker at the same time. Now, saving throws are such an important role, and I'm always talking about this in builds because certain saving throw proficiencies are better, and each class will get 2. Now, in my opinion, Constitution saving throw proficiency and Wisdom saving throw proficiency are among the best. Wisdom because if you get hit with a Wisdom save spell like Hold Person or even Command, that really sucks. You're basically out of combat and you're going to get free crits against you. And on the inverse, Constitution saving throws are important because if you are, let's say, using Hold Person yourself, you require a concentration to hold that spell. And that's always going to be a Constitution saving throw, so if you can get a bonus to that, you're much more likely to hold your saves. There are 3 classes that have Constitution saving throw proficiency, and that's the Sorcerer, great because it's a spellcaster, the Fighter, and the Barbarian. Now, I do want to mention that multiclassing and starting with, it only gives you the saving throw proficiency if you start with that class. Now, funny enough, you wouldn't think a Barbarian and a Fighter would multiclass well with a Spellcaster, but if you go with a Fighter, you're getting yourself a bonus action heal and heavy armor proficiency, and the Constitution saving throw proficiency. My personal preference is the Barbarian because this can add your Constitution modifier to your armor class while you're wearing robes. This does not stack with your mage armor, but there's ways to get your Constitution modifier pretty high, which will make you extremely tanky, and this also works with shields. And again, we'll talk about multiclass in a bit later, but the Sorcerer is honestly one of the best spellcasters just because they're good at everything and their bonus action spells. And as for Wisdom saves, there's actually 5 classes that have that, and that's the Druid, Cleric, Paladin, Warlock, and Wizard. And also mentioned Dexterity saving throws as they are very common, things like Fireball and most evocation spells. The Rogue, the Monk, and the Bard are the 3 that get Dexterity saving throw proficiencies. Next is the skill proficiencies, abilities, and spellcasting modifiers. Now, this is kind of complex, but as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the charisma-based classes like your Bard, Paladin, Warlock, and Sorcerer get you these face skills here. But for your other companions, if you have a dexterity-based class, I would recommend the dexterity skill Sleight of Hand. You're going to always need to be able to steal things and pickpocket and disarm traps. And also Stealth. These are both dexterity-based skills, and they're very important. I'd also recommend having every character have either acrobatics or athletics because these are going to take the higher result and prevent you from getting shoved. Sometimes you get shoved and it just completely ends your entire life. Don't want that to happen. I also do want to mention with survival checks, this is one that I don't like to use because this is for chests in the ground. If you fail a survival check, grab your shovel and use it anyways. It doesn't really matter. So if you pass or fail a survival check, yeah, you know where the chest is going to be. Perception checks are important as well. These are also attained by playing as a full drow or elf, and humans get to choose a free proficiency alongside Gith, which can change theirs around, but those are typically the ones that you do want to focus on. But it's nice to have like your wizard focus on arcana, history, things like that are relevant to the skills that they are best with. But the face of your party typically wants these skills here. Now, ability scores. Everyone needs one stat here, Constitution. This is your health. It sucks to have 8 Constitution because then you're just getting one shot by like everything. And another stat that I think is extremely powerful, just due to how Baldur's Gate 3 plays, if you're a D&D tabletop fan watching this video, Dexterity in Baldur's Gate 3 is a D4 initiative die, meaning if you get a high Dexterity modifier, which adds a bonus to your initiative, you're likely going to go first, and in a game like Baldur's Gate 3, where you can do crazy amounts of Nova damage, this is an important stat. I actually run a lot of my builds with 16 Dexterity instead of 16 Constitution, which is typically how some other people like to run theirs. I always say you can swap these around, but I like Dexterity in Baldur's Gate 3 unless you really want to use a two-handed weapon, which are very good, but a lot of classes can get by with running Dex just because of all the benefits to armor class and your initiative. So yeah, the top 3 are our physical stats. Depending on the weapon choice for melee, you're going to use either strength or dexterity, and then Constitution for everybody. And then the last 3 are our mental stats. Now, these are all really important. I actually recommend having a bit of extra wisdom again, because wisdom saves are some of the most important in Baldur's Gate 3, but there's certain classes that cast with intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Now, for intelligence, the wizard is the intelligence class of Baldur's Gate 3. You can actually get an item very early on in the game that can set your intelligence to a high score, which lets you actually use some of this. It sets it to 17, so you get a +3 to your wizard, and you can actually multi-class in the wizard to learn spells from scrolls, which are really nice. But they're the only intelligence-based class, making them kind of strange. But There's also 2 subclasses here, the Eldritch Knight Fighter and the Arcane Trickster Rogue, which will also use their intelligence modifier. We got our wisdom classes in the top right-hand section here with the Cleric, Druid, and Ranger. Now, the Monk actually has a subclass, the Way of the Four Elements, which lets them use a little bit of spellcasting, and it uses wisdom, but I would typically recommend not to use that subclass. And if you want to do spellcasting, there's many others that are really great, but just a fun one. Wisdom casters are our clerics, druids, and rangers, and I'd honestly recommend to always have a cleric in your party just because they're honestly the best class in Baldur's Gate 3 due to all the crazy benefits that they get, and the video game nature of Baldur's Gate does change a lot of the abilities, with things like Spirit Guardians being absolutely powerful. And as mentioned previously, the Warlock, Sorcerer, Paladin, and Bard are Charisma casters. However, the Barbarian does have some weird charisma-based stuff. If you play Wild Magic, it's there. And certain abilities you get from your race, which is not really the point of this video, but if you pick a high half-elf, or high elf, either of those, you get a free cantrip, which will use your intelligence like a wizard. So for most people, they are going to be useless until patch 8 release. The latest update to Baldur's Gate 3 added in Booming Blade, making the high elf a great race choice for anyone because they can add a very powerful melee cantrip that doesn't use any ability. Use your weapon attack roll. So I guess for example, ability score spreads for a class, let's say we want to play a wizard, and let's say the Blade Singing Wizard subclass, which is a bit melee focused. So we're going to have a high dexterity of 16, 14 constitution, and our spellcasting ability will be at 16 here. There is a choice you can get in the early game that can add 1 to your stat. So some people like to reclass or change their abilities at Withers and take it up to 17 because this will boost it to 18, giving you a +4 to your spellcasting modifier at the very start of whenever you can get that ability. And similarly, if you're playing like a Bard or a Sorcerer, 16 Charisma, 16 Dexterity, 14 Constitution. Now, multiclassing is where things get fuzzy because your spellcasting ability modifier will take the ability modifier of the last class you took the first level in. Let's say you're playing as a Sorcerer and you take 6 levels of the Sorcerer, and then you add in the Wizard. Your Wizard intelligence modifier is going to be used for spellcasting if you use scrolls or illithid abilities. And any stat that you, or any spell you take from that class, so your wizard spells use their intelligence, the charisma will be used by the sorcerer spells. There are ways to get your spell save DC, which is what the enemy has to roll to succeed on this the spell, really high. So you can multi-class a little bit later on with certain gear, and I cover that in my build guide videos. But another thing, you can multi-class a 3rd class back in, so the sorcerer, wizard, and then warlock again, that first level in the warlock. Not that I would recommend ever doing that, but you would get your spellcasting modifier back to charisma. This is important because, as I mentioned earlier, you can add in the Cleric and the Ranger to get heavy armor proficiencies on like your Sorcerer. The only downside is using scrolls, it's then going to use your spellcasting modifier from Cleric. So that's why I mentioned going with the Fighter for your first level to get heavy armor proficiency, or Barbarian to get the boost to your robes, and then adding in the Sorcerer if you want to do a single level dip, that's preferable. But multiclassing is a little bit more complex, and in most cases, if you were to play 12 levels of the Sorcerer, Cleric, and Fighter, those are some of the best builds in the game. You don't want to multiclass them. But I guess a brief multiclassing overview is attack stat. If you get a free attack from the Barbarian level 5, it won't stack with like the Fighter level 5 extra attack. However, there's one thing: if you're not playing in honor mode, the Warlock Pact of the Blade will actually give you an extra attack on any of these other classes that would get a extra attack. And this is actually really strong because you can then do it on a Paladin, get 3 smites. You can do it on your Fighter, Barbarian, and even Bard, and keep the charisma ability here on these 2 classes. Very powerful multi-classes. I, again, talked about these 4 being really good for multi-classing, but I'd honestly recommend playing like a full Sorcerer. The Paladin and the Sorcerer go together well. The Paladin and the Warlock go together well. The Warlock and the Bard go together well. And my personal favorite is to take 10 levels of the Sword Bard because they get a Slashing Flourish ability, which lets you attack 2 people, and then take the Paladin for Divine Smite. 2 levels of that let you smite 2 people at once. Honestly, what I think to be the most powerful build in Baldur's Gate 3 is just absurd. So in that case, you're making your Paladin hit a lot harder than they naturally would be able to. It's like a situation where 1 + 1 = like 3. But I have done videos on multiclassing, so if you want to see that in more detail, I might do an updated build on or video on that. Just let me know in the comments. And now I'll break down each individual class. And now that we got the overviews out of the way, the Barbarian is a very tanky class because they can add, again, their charisma modifier to their armor class, or constitution modifier to their armor class. Going with a high constitution gives them a lot of health, and they naturally get more health than every other class. With the Barbarian, get a base 12 health points at level 1, and adding 7 every time that they level up. which is more than every other class. The others that are strong get 10 health points and only get 6 on level up. So yeah, barbarians are very tanky. And for this reason, you actually kind of want to have their armor class lower than others, because when they have a lower armor class, they draw attacks. And when they're in their rage, they take half physical damage. And there's actually a subclass that'll give you half every damage type except for psychic. So they're among the best tanks in the game. And honestly, very fun too. There's a new subclass that lets you kick and throw people around. So if you like WWE, this is the one to go with. Barbarians are a ton of fun. Now the fighter, if you are used to a good old sword and board or a two-hander weapon, this is the subclass for you, honestly. The fighter is powerful because once they hit level 11, they get 3 attacks per action, which again, unless you're multi-classing the Warlock, no one else can really do that, which makes it strong in its own right. The fighter is a great archer as well. It has a subclass, the Arcane Archer, which is really devoted to that kind of gameplay. The Arcane Archer is kind of like an archer focus. Its most powerful ability is actually the Banishing Shot, which lets you banish enemies out of fights. Really powerful. The Battle Master is your just straightforward attacker. It's got some more powerful attacks, being able to frighten enemies or push them around. And it has a rally which can pick up your downed allies without getting counterspelled. And then Riposte, one of the most powerful abilities in the game. Whenever you can weaponize your reaction, that's really good in Baldur's Gate 3, because you got an action, a bonus action, and a reaction. Being able to do additional attack on your turn and do an additional 1d8 and eventually 1d10 of damage is crazy. This is one of the most powerful in the game. Champion's nice if you like critical hits, and the Eldritch Knight got a massive buff in patch 8 most recently because it added in Booming Blade. Silly enough, it'll make it do 4 attacks using a bonus action war magic. It's absolutely absurd. I think one of the top 3 builds in the game is the Eldritch Knight. Battlemaster is just a hair behind it. And actually, in some situations, the Battlemaster is a little bit better. It's a very good class in general, the fighter. Now, next up is the Rogue, and I like the Rogue. I think it's a fun class. It's just a little bit different in how it would play versus D&D Tabletop into Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, sneak attacks are a little bit hard to set up. Like, you do need to have advantage, and that's kind of their main thing. But they only get 1 attack per action, where some other classes, which can do kind of a similar vibe, get more oomph out of it, getting 2 attacks or eventually 3 like the fighter. Now, where the Rogue really shines, it's one of the best multi-classes in Baldur's Gate 3 because one of them can give you an extra bonus action, which is invaluable. That's the Thief Rogue. And then there's the Assassin, which can be a literal assassin. This is best multi-class, honestly, with the Gloomstalker Ranger and the Fighter. These 3 together are really, really strong. In fact, some people that want a bard-like experience, or a rogue-like experience, would actually have a lot of fun with the bard because they also get a lot of the skills, but they also do spellcasting too. And if you don't really care for the spellcasting, that's fine, but they got a lot of buffs on top of that. And the reason that I mentioned the bard is they get medium armor proficiency, more weapon proficiencies, but they also, this is what I think to be the best subclass in Baldur's Gate 3 because they get slashing flourish here, which lets you attack 2 enemies at once. I mentioned the Paladin getting divine smite on top of both of those attacks because you can potentially add a 4d8 of radiant damage onto 2 attacks. Crazy stuff. But another thing, they also get slashing flourish ranged. This hasn't been changed since patch 8. They did not change this, so it's working as intended, but you can attack the same target twice with a bow attack. Yeah, that's absurd. And then once you get level 6, you get 2 attacks per action, so that's 4 attacks with your action. The Sword Bard is absolutely busted in terms of its strength, and honestly, one of the strongest in the game. Valor Bard is similar if you want a more balanced experience there. I also made a mod, the College of Winter Spirit, just a little shout out there. But yeah, for those that want to play a rogue-like experience, getting a 2-weapon fighting College Sword Bard will likely give you a more satisfying experience, and they're a charisma-based class, so again, just good for the face of the party. Now, the Monk is really strong. They're, in my opinion, the best single-target physical damage build in the game. That's because they get these very special flurry of blows, and the open-hand Monk being really, really strong, with Shadowblade also being good, and the others are fun too. The Monk's a great class because they flow between melee attacking and just literally destroying everything with their bonus actions. So they are great multi-class with the Rogue because the Rogue Thief gives them another bonus action, and your Flurry of Blows is a bonus action that can do over 100 damage at end game. It's crazy strong, and again, they're one of the best at single target damage for a good reason. Now, in my opinion, the best spellcaster in Baldur's Gate 3 is a Sorcerer. The reason being, they get less spell options than the Wizard, but on the inverse, they can cast more spells per turn because they get the very powerful meta magics. These are what makes them overpowered. Now, extended spell's kind of interesting because it works weird. If there's any gear that you have that'll get procced, that gives you conditions or any type of buff, this will double it. It's kind of absurd. Another thing that's crazy about the Sorcerer is Twin Spell. Now this means you can Twin Haste, which is a really good level 3 spell, which gives you an extra action, and you can put it on yourself and another teammate. So your fighter can get 3 more attacks at late game, and you can cast 2 spells per turn, and then at level 3, take Quicken Spell, which gives you a bonus action spell. So yeah, you can end up doing 3 spells in a turn. With certain gear, you can do 4 spells and even 5 spells in a turn. It's actually kind of crazy what the sorcerer's capable of. They're very powerful for spell casting. And yeah, again, Extended Spell and Twin Spell are really good. But I also want to mention kind of a little cheese that they never patched out of the game. Twin Spell with the staff Marika Heshker. This is a late game thing. I shouldn't be mentioning this in the video, but the most overpowered. You can twin that Chain Lightning that you can get from that staff, and 2 Chain Lightning level 6 spell is just crazy. So yeah, if you like spellcasting, the Sorcerer is really fun. I think I should also just mention the Wizard here too. The Wizard is better at utility. This is because you see there, they get 3 cantrips and 6 spells that they can learn, whereas the Sorcerer gets 4 cantrips and 2 spells. The Wizard can learn them from scrolls as well, and they can also get them a little bit cheaper. They also get their Arcane Recovery, so they get a little more juice. They can continue casting spells after a Sorcerer would have ran out of their spell slots. And one thing that the Wizard can do well is multiclass. You can actually multiclass the Wizard with the Sorcerer to learn all spells, and then there's certain gear that makes you able to cast them without missing, and that's pretty crazy. But the Wizard's also interesting because it has the new Blade Singing subclass, which means you can learn whatever spell in the game that's on a scroll, and then also do melee attacks. So yeah, they're very versatile, whereas the Sorcerer is just pick your damage spells and cast them, take out the enemies. The Wizard is like, what spell should I use? You can bring out Knock and open a door, or you can use Arcane Lock and lock a door, or you can use Dimension Door and teleport your team around. Whereas the Sorcerer would have to stock up on scrolls. The Wizard can just do it with their big brain powers. I think it's a good time to also mention the Warlock, the other like spellcaster archetype. They are different because their spell slots don't work like the rest of the classes in Baldur's Gate 3 that learn spells. They get Pact Magic, which are these purple spells. They get 2 of them and eventually 3, and these recover on short rest. The Warlock is interesting. They get the 2 best cantrips in the game with Booming Blade and Eldritch Blast for melee or spellcasting damage, like 2 of the best damage cantrips in the game. They also have a very powerful new subclass that was added lately with the Hexblade, which can get them shield. They can get Bind Hex Weapon at level 1, meaning you can learn any type of weapon on any character at level 1 and use Charisma for it, which is kind of cool for multiclassing and do some weird stuff there. They also get a Curse. This is one of the best, honestly, if you like spellcasting and melee attacking. It's between the Warlock and Bard for that role, and honestly, a Bard Lock combination of these two is even more powerful, but yeah, either of these are great if you like that role. Now, my personal favorite class, or one of my personal favorites, is the Paladin. This is what I did my first playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm happy with it because the Paladin has an extra layer of role-playing on top because they have their oath that they uphold, and you can lose that really easily, and surprisingly easily. Now, each of the subclasses has their own oaths. The Vengeance Paladin is going to be, in my opinion, one of the strongest because they have a kind of, what I thought to be broken but hasn't been patched ability, and they don't break their oath as easy as the others. The Oath of the Crown being the newest and a really easy one to break, but they get Spirit Guardians, which I did mention previously is a really good spell. And then if you break your oath, you get a new subclass, which is pretty good too. But Vengeance Paladin, I believe, is a really fun class for most people because you're not going to break your oath as often. And they get this crazy ability, Vow of Enmity. So with this, you get advantage on attack rolls against an enemy. This is a little bit crazy because you can go, boom, cast it on yourself, and then you're pissed and get advantage on every single attack roll. It's kind of silly because then if you're playing like a rogue, for example, and you want to get a ranged sneak attack off, this is the easiest way to proc it by playing a Paladin. Kind of absurd, but it's the way it is. So yeah, I thought this was going to get patched, and I was wrong. They didn't patch it, so I think it's here to stay, and that just makes this by default one of the strongest. They also get things like Hunter's Mark, which you don't hold a concentration on this either, by the way, so you can use a concentration on Hunter's Mark to do even more damage on an enemy. These both use bonus action, but this lasts for 10 turns, so pre-cast it before combat. And then at level 5, they get one of the craziest power spikes in Baldur's Gate 3 with extra attack, hold person, and Misty Step. So they can get away or chase down targets. They can hold them in place to get free crits, which, by the way, powers up your smites and adds additional damage die onto your attacks and your smites. It's absurd. And then the extra attack here. If you're a half-orc, you're going to be like one-shotting people nonstop. So yeah, Paladin's great. Despite having that extra layer of role play, I think it's really fun and great if you're on your first time playthrough. So yeah, great stuff. Next is the Cleric. Now, most people are going to run with Shadowheart in their party. She's one of the characters that is naturally a Cleric, and most people just keep her a Cleric. Their stats to prove it. Cleric's one of the best in the game, though. You kind of want to have one in your party, especially if you're a first-time player. A lot of people really like the life domain as a cleric. I just want to mention something. Healing is more so being reactive. Your characters don't always have to be at 100% health in this game. It's a resource, hit points, and that's the amount of hit points you can take. It's a resource that's meant to be spent like spell slots, in my opinion. And while the life domain is the best healer in the game, I honestly think it's better to be proactive than reactive. And that's where the late domain is really good, because they can give disadvantage on enemy attack rolls. And they also have one of the best builds to set up with Radiating Orbs. You can check out my channel for full builds on that. And it's great at protecting the team. And they also get, so the life domain only gets spells that they naturally would get anyways. And the light domain gets an exclusive spell that's only it and the Tempest domain can get, but they also get Scorching Ray, Fireball, Wall of Fire, which are fun casting spells. So you can actually play a light domain and drop fireballs. It's fantastic. I also want to mention the Tempest domain, which is more offensive focus, whereas light domain is defensive focus. And they get Ice Storm, Destructive Wave, which is a spell that both of them get at level 9, and it's really strong. But they also get like Thunder, and they can max roll lightning damage, so they're really good too. But I'd honestly recommend for first-time players, Light Domain is just a great one to play. And Life Domain, which also gets heavy armor proficiency, but I think that there's better classes, and it's a good one though. And next we'll talk about the Druid here, which is it's a fun one. As I mentioned, it's one of the strongest in level 1 because Shillelagh here, or Shillelagh depending on your pronunciation, uses the wisdom for your for your attack rolls, but you can turn a torch into one of the strongest weapons in the game at the start of the game. They also get exclusive spells and things like Thorn Whip, but level 7 is where they really shine because they get some exclusive spells. Now, they have a few different archetypes in how they play. Land Druid's like a caster. I'm not a massive fan of it, but it's fun because they have Wild Shape to back up if they need extra health. They're tanky. The Circle of the Moon is your typical Druid, though. They go into Wild Shape often, and they can also heal themselves in Wild Shape. I said the Barbarian's the tankiest class in the game. The Circle of the Moon Druid is, in my opinion, maybe a little tankier. They give each other a good run for the money because it gets a lot of health between its summons. On top of that, they also get their Myrmidon forms, which are really strong and can stun 3 enemies per turn, which means 3 enemies don't take their action. Great in a lot of situations. The Circle of the Spores is kind of like a necromancer, and it's a fun one. They get a symbiotic entity form, and it's kind of a cool class. They get fungal zombies that they can raise. And finally, the Circle of the Stars, which is kind of cool because it's more of a radiant-based caster, but it's kind of in the same area as the Circle of the Land. They have their starry form where you'd be in instead of going into a wild shape. But yeah, the Druid is honestly a very underrated class. And again, level 7 is when they get things like Ice Storm, Grasping Vine, which was recently changed on the latest patch to be a bonus action now and actually worth using. And they also get the Woodland Being, and only the Druid can get Woodland Being. It's a summon with a summon that can hold your Spike Growth for you. With Spike Growth being a really good spell for crowd control, but not having to hold a concentration on it and have your summon hold it. Summons are bustedly overpowered in Baldur's Gate 3, and the Wizard and the Druid are 2 of the best with them. And finally, we have the Ranger. This is in a weird spot. Now, the Ranger, a lot of D&D players know, the Ranger, well, it's a good class. If you want to do a specific role from the Ranger, every other class can probably do it a little bit better, but honestly, I think where the Ranger really shines is they have a really good subclass with the Gloomstalker. And with the Gloomstalker, you get an extra attack on the first turn of combat, and you get a +3 to your initiative, so you're more likely to go first, and you also get additional movement speed. So they're great at being like an assassin. And as mentioned, the Gloomstalker is probably best multi-classed alongside like the Rogue and the Fighter. Again, the Fighter gets Action Surge for an extra action, which makes your first turn deadly. And then with the Rogue, they have the Assassin, which can give you basically your actions back, and you can do some pretty absurd stuff with these 3 classes combined together. The Beastmaster and the Hunter are also really good. If you like an archer, the Hunter comes online a little bit later. Like level 11 is when they get their volley, which is the best ability that they get. Same thing with the Beastmaster, which their companions get a lot stronger at level 11. So these 2 you typically want to take to higher levels. And the Gloomstalker, you typically would like to multi-class in most cases, but you can play all the way to level 12 with both these. The Swarmkeeper's a new one. It's kind of fun, different if you like the vibes of insects. And again, if you want to be like an archer, the Sword Bard with their double attack is just even better because they can attack 4 people on their action at level 6, whereas the Ranger gets 2 attacks, and they're good for kiting enemies, which is good if you like that style of play, but the Bard with their crowd control is just kind of a better version of the Ranger, and they're a half caster. The Paladin is also a half caster, which is charisma based with Divine Smite, which ends up being a lot more powerful than what the Ranger can put out. And even some people have commented on my videos in the past saying the Ranger gets Hunter's Mark. Well, yeah, so does the Vengeance Paladin, which is crazy strong. So there's certain classes, again, in Baldur's Gate 3 that have an easier time. play what you want to play, but my personal recommendations, if you're wanting a melee character, the Barbarian is very tanky in that role. The Fighter is great offensively without having to put too much thought into what you're doing. The Bard is going to be honestly one of your best classes. I like the Bard level 10 with 2 levels of the Paladin, but the Paladin is also a class that you can take all the way to level 12. It's a great melee character as well, due to Divine Smite being massive Nova damage. They got high burst damage. The Monk is the best single target damage in the game, so it is great as well. Those would be my recommendations here for melee attackers. And for spellcasters, the Sorcerer, in my opinion, it is my favorite class. I love the Sorcerer. It's very strong in spellcasting. You can just cast so many more spells. If you like to be a jack of all trades in a magical sense, the Wizard's great too. You also will get Gale, who is a wizard, and it feels right to leave him that way. And the Warlock is good if you like spellcasting, with a choice to just stab someone from time to time. I'm also going to mention the Cleric is a fantastic caster. Shadowheart likely in your party will be a Cleric, but if she's not in your party, you can be one because they're amazing. And the Druid is it's probably the most underrated class in Baldur's Gate 3 because it's good. It's good at spellcasting, it's good at tanking damage, and it gets a bunch of summons. I just don't love the gameplay of Druids, and not a lot of people do, but they're very, very strong. And I guess my top 3 recommendations for classes, if you like melee attacking and you kind of want to do everything, Sword Bard is the best choice there. As mentioned, best subclass in Baldur's Gate 3 in my opinion. It just gets so many crazy strong abilities. It can do everything, and it does it honestly really good. They say master of none, but it kind of is really good at a lot of things. Even better with the Paladin. I also would recommend playing the Paladin either as a multi-class or solo. It multi-class again with Warlock, Sorcerer, and Bard, all very well. But even on its own, it's a good protector. It gets the aura of protection to keep your allies safe. So if you like playing more of a support, while also having some of the highest melee damage in the game, Paladin's the way to go. Does have that extra layer of roleplay that you have to stick to though, unless you like oath breaking. And finally, the Sorcerer is my last recommendation. If you like spellcasting, this is the best spellcaster, and it's fun, charisma-based class. So those are the classes in Baldur's Gate 3. Let me know if you have any questions or comments regarding that in the comment section below. Hope this video is useful, and I hope you guys all have a fantastic day. We'll see you in the next one. Subscribe if this was useful.